Go. All right, recording here. Here we go.
The following is a presentation of Stewed Productions.
Hey everybody, it's Josh from InterBrews. This is where I shamelessly self-promote my Patreon page. So if you love this required drinking and all the things, that's a thing. Exclusive episodes, support the show, make it into even more wondrous things. Anyway, let's start the show.
It's time for a deep dive with the craft beer classics that made you fall in love back in the day. It's a refresher course on the best beers of all time. This is InterBrews Required Drinking. Now here are your hosts, Keenan and Josh Stewart.
Welcome. Yeah.
Yeah, hold on. This is the closest thing I have to a graphic so far. Fade up.
Oh, look at that.
And then on today's show. Welcome, everybody. Another episode of Required Drinking, InterBrews Required Drinking. I'm Josh. Keenan.
I am Keenan, and I am excited for this one. This is one of those granddaddy beers. It might actually be as old as your granddaddy, depending on the age of the person listening to this.
It's this is you could do it. Yeah,
you could if you were a small child listening to this, because so we are talking about Sierra Nevada Pale Ale, which was originally first brewed by Sierra Nevada Brewing Company, back in 1980. That is when the first batch of this beer was brewed.
Think about 1980 for a second.
Yeah.
Neither one of us, I was born, probably conceived. I was conceived somewhere around the beginning of 1980, maybe slightly before. I don't have all the details on that one, but
you weren't entirely there.
Yeah, no, I wasn't. I couldn't tell you what was going on. Luckily, but I get the general idea. So my birthday's in September of 1980. I'll let everybody else do that math.
There you go.
So yeah, even your cat was like, "No, I'm out on this one."
Yeah, it's like, nope, TMI. But yeah, no, like this is a beer that you can this is, so anybody that's listening to this show
or watching, there you go. Mm-hmm. Anyone that's listening or watching to this show, if you're not familiar with the four-letter word or four-letter phrase acronym, I don't know, BJCP. If you're not familiar with it, it stands for Beer Judge Certification Program. And it's basically just a fancy schmancy way of certifying you as you're not just a beer judge, you are a beer judge that knows all of the criteria for which to judge those beers and can do it reliably, consistently, blah, blah, blah. To be at the top echelon of a beer judge, you actually have to know some stuff. And if you look at all the beer styles, so you look at, my cat is in here, he's just like, I want to drink beer too. If you look at all the beer styles, you've got, just new things that have popped up that have been added to the BJCP list in the last couple of years, like field beer and hazy beers. And I'm sorry, they're called hazy or juicy because they're not really sure how to describe them perfectly. But you get to some of these granddaddy styles like American Pale Ale, American Amber, American IPA, and so on and so forth. Beers that really define the American craft beer landscape. And Sierra Nevada Pale Ale is the gold standard, or at least when it launched, and by all accounts, is still the gold standard for what the American Pale Ale should be. I just took my first sip, and it's one of those things where you're just like, we'll get into the freshness and all that kind of stuff, finding these beers, right? But we'll get into that in a second. But granted, it's just a delicious beer. It's just,
so yeah, and we'll talk freshness here in a minute. Like I'm excited to nerd out and get on my soapbox for that. But I mean, this is a super simple beer. And you can go up on I was actually booping around a little bit on Sierra Nevada's website,
And they've got the homebrew recipe for it. They've got their original homebrew recipe for Sierra Nevada Pale Ale, and it is literally just he just had it up. It's literally just 2-row, so the basest, pretty much simplest plain Jane barley malt you can get. Some caramel 60, so a caramel malt that has a little bit of sweetness, adds a little bit of a very, very mild, like kind of toffee note to it. And that's it on the grain side, which for a pale ale IPA is totally normal. And then on the hop side, it's just Cascade. Just Cascade nonstop. Just, there's a 90-minute, 60-minute, 30-minute, and a flame out Whirlpool edition, whatever. Granted, this is the homebrew edition. We can talk about the like a larger scale kind of recipe development for this later, but it's not dry hopped. This is a pale ale, an American pale ale, not dry hopped, and it's like it kind of is a nice step back from pale ales don't have to be dry hop, like just have the piss dry hopped out of them to be. They're not, pale ales aren't intended to be mini IPAs.
They I'm trying to I don't remember when I first heard the term dry hopping. It wasn't right away, and maybe it was a thing that went on that I just didn't know about. When I think about when I got into craft beer, which would have been the early mid-aughts.
Did you say craft beer or crack beer? Because I was like, you know what? Yes, either one of them works perfectly.
Either way, yes, both. I remember like when I first heard about dry hopping, it was like, it was one of those things I had to go and investigate. Right now, it's like you just hear it everywhere.
It's a buzzword. It's not like a technical ooh.
But I don't know when it became prevalent. Now it's just done. It seems like every beer is dry hopped.
Well, and I'm like starting to get talking on like technical stuff. I'm like, ooh, and before you know it, we're not even gonna be talking about the beer. But I mean, a lot of it was admittedly that dry hopping hasn't always been cheap or even preferable. Like hoppy notes in beer has not always been appealing to the American palate. I mean, hell, even just look at not to like stop talking about Sierra Nevada and talk about another brewery and brand altogether, but look at Arrogant Bastard, who built their entire brand, the entire like persona of that beer is based on, this is so bitter you can't handle it, and you drink it now and it's still a bitter beer, but it's not like outlandishly unpalatable or anything. But there was a time 20, 30 plus years ago where bitter beer was unacceptable. I mean, bitter beer face.
As a society, we've all gone through that lupulin threshold shift. Like there's enough lupulin in our water supply. It just has seeped into the water table. And our water comes out of the tap at like 10 IBUs.
And so this is a beer that the hop character is present, and it is certainly forward, but it's not aggressive. I wouldn't say it's assertive. It's not like, look at me, how bitter I am. Like this is something that, when full disclosure, this is the first full glass of this that I've had. I've had sips off my wife's, like she's been drinking from the 6-pack, because I was saving myself for this. And I had like 1 or 2 sips, and I kind of like had that little nostalgia of like thinking back to when I was in like my early 20s and I'm in a craft beer bar, or I'm in just a bar and the beer selection's kind of meh. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to get the local guy's pale ale. I'm going to go get this. And it's just like, it's simple. It's clean. It's it's tasty AF, but we're gonna get to some aging qualities and stuff here eventually. But I mean, Sierra Nevada is just like, if you read up on the history of the brewery and a lot of their philosophy in how they do stuff, there's a lot of stuff that they do that is not cutting corners, trying to be innovative, trying to be fun. You recall, if you guys have listened to our the episode we did on Live Oak Hefeweizen, you remember we were talking a little bit about like open fermentation and how like that does some weird stuff, like that contributes some very unique yeast character and whatnot. Sierra Nevada Pale Ale is open fermented for the first couple of days, basically for primary fermentation. They run it through an open fermenter, which gives it a unique yeast and fermentation profile that you otherwise wouldn't get. And from a brewery of their size, and especially an American brewery of their size, doing that is, kind of unheard of.
Yeah, it's well, it would be unheard of if they didn't do it.
Yeah, well, yeah, I know. They tell us all about it until we've heard it, and yeah, they like. There's as a professional brewer, there's a lot of you don't even realize, like when I first came into the professional brewing scene, just cutting my teeth over at Independence Brewing Company, we were talking about the yeast, and people were like, oh yeah, we're going to get a new pitch of Chico in, we're, blah, blah, blah. And people were referring to the yeast as Chico. And I didn't know like what the scoop was. Like, that's not a number I'm familiar with. What yeast are you referring to? And they're like, Chico 001, 1056, like basic, just this, the American yeast strain, or at least ale strain, I should say. I'm sure Budweiser would sit here and go, we have the most American yeast.
And we've got the Beechwood to show it.
Yeah, exactly. But so even that, like, that the yeast that arguably makes up the majority of American style beer in America, at least, all originates from Sierra Nevada. Like, that's the yeast strain that they use, and everyone's kind of been borrowing from them, not literally, but everyone's been using that yeast strain because, proof in the pudding, Sierra Nevada makes some great West Coast style, really just American style ales, and they go, wow, this yeast can do everything, and we're going to borrow and steal from the success of Sierra Nevada Brewing Company.
It makes me, I need to do more of a deep dive on the history of that yeast strain, because I wonder, when they were first starting out in 1980, it wasn't like you could just go down to a homebrew shop.
No.
You had to know it.
I don't think there were homebrew shops, really.
I don't know. No, well, they, the story is widely proclaimed how Ken Grossman had to build the original equipment from old dairy equipment and retrofit it. And there's actually a cool video where early this year, like pre-COVID, they got out there and did a little tour with their old equipment. I don't know if they had to cut it short or what, but it's the original brew house that they fired back up. Like, the door barely like hangs on there the right way, and it's just like, okay, that's. Yeah. I mean, it's quaint and cool now, but I mean, that was a professional brew house, in our lifetime.
There are lots of there's lots of brew houses out there that are just, I was going to say they're workhorses in the sense that they just work. Mm-hmm. Like, do they boil stuff? Yep. Will they louder? Will they filter out wort from a grain? Yep. Is it going to be fast? Nope. And they just make it work. But so for the record, I just pulled up my old Google machine, and because I was like, I remember the Carter administration was who legalized home brewing, and that was in 1978. Mm-hmm. So in 1978, home brewing was legalized. So let's assume that Ken Grossman and his partners weren't home brewing illegally.
No.
Never. No.
Never.
Never. Kids, listen. And so assuming that, Carter administration said you can legally do it, and they had at most like a year and a half of experience home brewing before they said, let's open a brewery. And then in 1980, boom, here's Sierra Nevada Brewing Company. They did about 1,000 barrels their first year, which a lot of craft breweries would be more than pleased to do 1,000 barrels their first year.
Yeah. Yeah. Cause I mean, yeah, he wasn't working at a brewery pre Sierra Nevada. He had like a bike shop, and he's like rebuilding, lawnmower motors. There's a whole thing on their website about it.
Yeah. And there's a lot to be said for the success of Sierra Nevada, because they are in many respects, like, they are the birth of the American craft beer scene. I'm sure like Anchor Steam is going to sit over here and just be like, excuse me. But the spirit of, hey, we're a bunch of home brewers. I make a great beer. All my friends, my family, they love it. They all say I should try selling this in bars. And I say, all right, cool, I'll give it a shot. And then before you know it, it's like, yeah, you really got something here. And that spirit of, American ingenuity, American, creativity of going like, there's nothing like this on the market. I'm going to make something like it.
Yeah. If I drink a whole 6-pack during the show, is that bad form?
Well, no, it's required drinking. You have to. That's it's not just a clever name.
No. Yeah. Okay. All right. Good. It's just a super drinkable, good beer. I mean, I'm just sitting here. It's one of those beers where, like, I don't know if it would have been right when it came out early on in my craft beer evolution, which is, way later. But, when you're kind of figuring out what beer is and what you like, and your palate starts to morph and mature. I remember seeing this beer in an old issue of Maxim magazine, like the top 10 beers you got to try now, or you're a total dork, or whatever the
exactly,
whatever the Maxim headline was. But I think this was number 1, like best beers we've tried. And I remember looking at it and like, it's like, I've tried that beer, but I don't know if I like, it was like early on where I was, like, I don't know if I thought that with beer, it was kind of angry at me. And I couldn't, I don't know. But then now it's like, yeah, this is super duper enjoyable. They can it now, which was a big deal when that happened. And it's like, it kind of personifies like the best parts of California.
Yeah.
Not like LA, tent city, high taxes, not all that, all this, not all the sad parts of California.
No. The
crushed dreams. Yeah. Harvey Weinstein, none of that.
I mean, it's named after the Sierra Nevada mountains.
Yes.
And this is the kind of beer that you could see, like, man, if you were drinking this camping or like out hiking or, getting outside doing something, or you're on your back patio, like, this is I was going to call it a sunshine beer. And I'm like, no. Those are all the wheat beers. That's what but this is a, like, man, getting out in beautiful weather, kind of enjoying the world, enjoying a patio. Like,
this is what the forest tastes like.
Yeah.
After it's what green.
In a good way. In a good way.
This is green.
It's like mushrooms and dirt.
Well, that's maybe that when we hit a Revolve or something. But this is
we'll do one of those.
But when I think of like green, like back when you're a kid, it's like, what flavor you want? Red. The red flavor. Popsicle or whatever. You never really get attached to green. At least I never did, because there was green apple, and there was lime, and there was whatever else. But now, as a man, almost 40, coming up sooner than I'd like to admit. Like I said, my birthday's in September. Anyway, Josh Toberfest coming up. Anyway, this is when I think green, like the label and the whole deal. It's like the Cascade. Like, I grew some Cascade hops, and they'll grow in Texas.
They will.
Houston, Texas. They'll grow pretty well too. Probably this year would have been it's been hot for a minute, but we've had some pretty mild, comparatively speaking, like here lately anyway. This would have been a good Cascade year hop, or a good hop growing, perhaps.
Yeah.
Perhaps.
Anyway. I ain't no botanist, but
yeah, me neither. But I grew some, and I got hop cones, and they smelled amazing. Yeah. They looked amazing.
Oh yeah. But yeah, I want to talk about the age of our beers.
Okay.
And because this is one of my, I'm gonna try and not get too high up on my soapbox here, but so this beer, the one that I'm drinking, so just for the record, the date is the 2nd of August, and I bought this like about a week and a half ago. So I was sold it, last 2 weeks of July. This beer was packaged in the middle of March, so this is like pre-coronavirus, or like right when coronavirus is like, man, there's 2 people in America that have coronavirus. Like this beer's old for a like drink fresh, tasty, pale ale, American style pale ale, which should be hop forward and all that. And a couple of things. One, it's not that bad. Like I've had some 4-month, 5-month-old beers that have been significantly worse than this. Ain't that bad.
Yeah.
But you can't have my beer.
And you've got bottles, right?
Yeah, I've got bottles. And so that's caveat 1 is it is not too bad. And caveat 2 is it's not inherently Sierra Nevada's fault, but it is it is indicative of one of the biggest problems, I think, plaguing the craft beer industry right now. Well, besides coronavirus, we can't even, like, everything's like, this is the biggest problem. Coronavirus is up top. COVID-19 is like number 1, but is overall freshness, because I want to be able to pop open a bottle or a can of Sierra Nevada Pale Ale or Torpedo or just any of their beers, and be able to confidently know, hey, I know this is going to be representative of the incredibly high caliber work that this brewery does. And if I don't remember, maybe it was a fever dream at some point, but I remember reading about like the starting up of Sierra Nevada, where these guys were kind of crazy in the grand scheme, where they shipped all of their beer around town and everything in refrigerated trucks. Like they busted ass to make sure that their beer was refrigerated at all times when they were shipping out, which really wasn't a thing. I mean, I'm sure there were some breweries that made a big deal of it, or some cared more than others, but for a small brewery to spend the capital on refrigerated trucks to get beer from point A to point B, and then to say, hey, we want to make sure this is sitting in cold storage when you're selling it, that's huge. But that's also huge and it's huge in the sense that it speaks volumes to how much of an emphasis they put on quality. Because man, beer is a perishable good. Unlike, you go to the grocery store, everything's got a best by date on it. And a lot of that is because, it's because stuff's just going to turn gross, or it's not going to taste right. And you will throw out a can of peaches that's been expired for 2 years because you're like, oh God, like who knows what kind of botulism or trash, or like maybe these peaches are red now. Like, I don't even know. But you could pick up a bottle of, thing of beer, and it might have a best by date. Doesn't always. We'll have a, hey, here's when it was made by or born on. I don't know, or born on, packaged, whatever.
Yeah.
Get out of my head, big business. But you don't you don't always know when you should be drinking this beer by. And some companies will turn around and say, yeah, our beer is good for 3 months. Our beer's, I mean, I was actually on Sierra Nevada's website checking this question, and they say, hey, our beer is, we certify our beer to be like good and fresh, and, you know, drink it within 150 days of packaging. And I'm telling you, even in a world-class packaging setup, if you're gonna, and I guess that's, I realize I'm still on my soapbox, and I'm getting into old man yells at cloud territory.
Do it.
But once it leaves your dock as a brewery, once the beer leaves your facility, at that point, you just have the word and the agreement of all of your wholesale distribution partners. And even if they say, man, I 100% guarantee that as long as it's in our possession, this beer is going to be refrigerated. Cool. Fantastic. They still got to drop it off at a store. And if you go into our, you know, HEB is the best grocery store here in Texas. I'll fight anyone that says otherwise. You go in there, you go to the beer section, and, you know, big wall of refrigerated beer. There's usually a smaller wall of non-refrigerated beer. But I'm not going to say for every HEB, but I've never been in an HEB that the back stock is refrigerated. So there's usually a pallet of beer sitting in the back, just waiting. And that can sit there for weeks. So the Sierra Nevada that you're drinking, or the beer that you're drinking, coming off of the cold shelf at your grocery store or your liquor store, yeah, it's been cold, man, but the stuff that's sitting in the back has been sitting in room temperature or Lord knows where.
Yeah. And I think that speaks to, like, this beer, when I got it, mine is fresher by date, but when I got it from my HEB, it was not in the refrigerated case. So mine is end of May 27th was package day, which, you know, I got this a week ago, I think. Where are we at? We're in August now. May.
Yeah, we're in August now.
So June and July, basically 60 days-ish, plus 60, 60 and a handful. I mean, it still tastes delicious, but yeah, we were talking about, like, what is optimum for a pale ale, and in your professional opinion, you said like 30 days. Is that what you?
If you, granted, I am a choosy SOB when it comes to, like, if I'm in the store and I'm picking up beers, I'm checking dates, and unless I am like really jonesing for a particular beer, I'm checking dates, and I'm probably not going to buy anything that's less than, or that's over 30 days old.
Okay, go into that real quick, because your next level, like when I get real choosy in the beer aisle, and my wife will leave me if we're grocery shopping together, she'll be like, I'll swing back around when you're ready.
Yeah.
And I'll pick you up here in a little bit. And I sit there on the beer aisle for a good 20, 30 minutes sometimes, just trying to figure out what's my mood going to be like 4 days from now? What are we eating? What am I going to do? Who, you know, what beers are out? Who do I need to support? What's, you know, what am I doing? Am I just, you know, succumbing to hype? And what's going on? Let me talk to me for a minute. Let me say a little prayer. God, help me pick out the perfect beer. You know, maybe wisdom.
Blessed are the beer shoppers.
Yeah, seriously. Who's the patron saint of beer shoppers? You know, they need to put that guy on the beer aisle so he can, I don't know. But anyway, I never think to look at date, because, I mean, one, I'm blessed with a really good, like, high turnover HEB, or David, the guy that runs our HEB, you know, he's awesome. He's there all the time. He's like, hey, when I walk, he's like, hey, we got this.
Yeah.
Meet your grocery store beer rep guy, and
for real,
our girl, whomever person,
your beer buyer.
Yes. Get to know them, figure out where they come from, because not all of them are created equal. David, upper echelon. Others were not as good prior to him. Yeah. So others were good, though. There were some other, you know, so this is over years. You got to
it's a relationship.
It is a relationship.
I mean, people put a lot of effort or a lot of stress on, like, man, get to know your bartender, get to know and, you know, there's something to be said for that. But if you buy retail beer a lot, please get to know the people that run your beer department.
Yeah.
Because they will, especially if you're get on good terms, man, the number of times where they'll be like, oh, hey, we just like, I set a case aside for you, or I set a 6-pack aside for you because I know that you're going to want this special thing.
Yeah.
I mean, if you chat them up enough and you're chill enough and not a super creeper, you know, they might even like, I know that, granted, I was working at a brewery at the time, but you know, the guys at the brewery would get the phone numbers from beer buyers and would be like, oh snap, we just got this new thing from Oscar Blues, or like, we just got this new beer from such and such, like, I know you want it. And we're like, cool, I'll be there Tuesday, hold a 6-pack or hold a 4-pack or whatever. And because again, you know, your bartender, get to know your beer buyers at your grocery or your liquor store, wherever you buy your retail beer.
Yes. Yeah, that is so key, because it doesn't take much. Just, you know, if you can figure out who they are. And then what I've figured out, what I've done in my grocery store, at my HEB, and it's mine. It's mine.
Yeah. No one else allowed.
I go and I get these beers. David's like, yeah, try this. We got this and all this stuff. And it's like, you get that. And then you go up to the register with the kids, typically kids. I say this, like, you know, high school, college age kids. I was when I was first getting into craft beer, or maybe a little younger, but they're like, oh yeah, I saw somebody else getting, is this good? And then I get to educate a little more. And I'm like, all right, listen. And so then it goes to that. And so you're like, you're gaining, but then you're also able to educate. And you're like, yeah, you should talk to, you know, the beer, you know, da, 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 da. And it's all of that. It's like circle of life right there in the grocery store.
Yeah. You're just paying it forward a little bit.
Yeah. And you're spreading the love of great beer, because there's nothing better than, you know, a great Sierra Nevada Pale Ale. Like at the end of the day, the sun's setting, you sip a little bit.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It is absolutely required drinking for those purposes. But yeah, that also just goes to show you, and man, this soapbox just, it's so big, I can't get off of it.
Suds it up, man. Suds it up.
Which this is, and I don't want to turn this into poo-pooing on Sierra Nevada, because they're great. They make excellent beers. They're a world-class brewery. Anything they produce is worth picking up at least once, just flat out. But this is all the more reason to, you know, check your dates, check the dates on the beers that you go pick up. And man, check your local breweries first, because, you know, depending on what you're into, whatever, but chances are your local brewery is going to have the freshest stuff there. Just chances are. Granted, if it's, you know, every brewery, or rather every brewery has its slowest mover, and every town has its slowest moving craft brewery, but you can find some really fantastic surprises sometimes where you're just like, holy cow, this IPA is 3 days old. Like, that happens with local breweries, especially self-distributed ones, because man, they are putting the love in for sure.
Yep. And that, I mean, I think Ken Grossman would probably even say, yes, start local and work your way out, because he said, you know, there's an interview on their website talking about, you know, now that we're this many years, you know, 40 years, that's.
Yeah. When you put it in that perspective, like it could be literally a grandfather to other breweries, other things. Like it's old. 40 is really, really old, Josh. That's what I'm trying to say.
It's not that old. I mean, it's older than, say, 5-6 year old brewery locally, but it's not. 40 is kind of the new 50, or 50's. No, wait, 40 is the. Never mind. Yeah, it's old.
Yeah.
But he said he would. You know, they can't scale back at this point, right? They're patent committed, but. He's like, if I were to open today, it wouldn't be like this. It wouldn't have, but it was 1980 when he opened. And like the evolution of the craft beer industry it's a lot of it is because of Sierra Nevada. I remember Sierra Nevada, like for trying like their porter, they just called it porter. It was great. That celebration ale that they have, and the Harvard, the hemisphere beers, and Bigfoot is theirs, right? Bigfoot barley wine.
Yeah.
That's what we should probably, is that Bigfoot?
I believe so. Yeah. Bigfoot.
The Bartley.
Yeah, I'm sorry, because there's Bigfoot, there's Yeti, there's
Yeah.
Sasquatch, there's a bunch of other random things that
Yeah,
all sound the
I
same.
think Bigfoot barley wine is theirs, and that might be.
That's right. And then there's Narwhal, there's Stout. They do Oktoberfest every year, which is a phenomenal collaboration between continents. Like they are top tier stuff, but it kind of gets to the conundrum that is high quality, amazing craft beer, which is, man, it's not meant to be commoditized.
Mm-hmm.
It's not meant to sit on a shelf until somebody just wants it. It's meant to be served fresh and to get to people ASAP, to be consumed ASAP. And there's just a certain amount of like, man, you can, unless you're a logistics company first and foremost, you're never, there's going to have to be compromise somewhere. And then when you start compromising on anything, you start compromising ultimately on quality and the end experience. That said, I wouldn't change a damn thing. Like, I want to make sure I always have Sierra Nevada available. I always want it, which is probably, I'm sure if Ken Grossman ever listens, if you do, please send us emails. Awesome. But if he's ever listening, it's like, just know that, like, man, we accept it. It's a double-edged sword.
Mm-hmm. Now, let me ask you this, professionally speaking, of the styles that need to be enjoyed fresh, like the ones that most, that most benefit from being super duper fresh, where would you put Pale Ale? What is the style that needs to be the freshest? Where does Pale Ale? And then what are some other styles that, it's fine if they're aged.
I mean, I'm sure there's some handy dandy chart. Like, now would be a perfect time for me to like pull down a bar graph. And like, well, let me show you this. Typically the hoppier the beer, the sooner you want to consume it. So your IPAs, your pale ales, your dry hop specialty type things that have a delicate hop character. It's like you want to get into those pretty quickly. Also, typically beers that have a lot of sort of the more mild malt characters. So like your ambers, really anything that's got a bunch of crystal malt in it, or caramel malt, depending on who you're talking to. That's especially in that like lower alcohol range. So your ambers, your brown ales, your 5% like stouts and porters and things like that. For the most part, those also want to be consumed quickly, because those are going to start getting those oxidized flavor notes can really become more prevalent faster. When you start getting into higher alcohol, so if you've got a 8% beer, well, you've got a little more room for aging to be kinder to that beer. And an excellent example to that is things like American barley wines, or really big like American like IPAs, a la like Dogfish Head 120, where that's a hoppy beer that you enjoy it fresh. It's got a big hop character. Like these are beers that have a big hop character because they're balancing against a big malt character. And if you let that sucker age with all that alcohol, all that malt, all that hop character, you get something different, but different isn't always bad. But for something like, pretty much anything 5% or lower, with the exception of like sours and wilds and weird stuff, blah, blah, blah. Everything has an asterisk in the brewing industry. But anything in that like 5% range, man, you want to, like, again, like under a month is gold, just do it. But if you start getting into the 2 or 3 month territory, that's where you kind of go, ooh, what style is this? Like, am I willing to, what kind of condition has it been sitting in? Like, you start questioning if it's worth because craft beer's gotten pricey, man. Is it worth your 10, 12 bucks dropping it on a 6-pack that's like 3 months old, 4 months old?
You know, now to swerve it over to a completely different area, I remembered that I had this book. This is a book I'm going to recommend to everybody.
Hey, that's me.
Yeah, you're in this category. Janet Fletcher, Cheese and Beer. If you don't have this book, get this book. And then follow her on Twitter. Some of the cheesiest tweets you'll ever read.
Hey.
Hey-o. But American Pale Ale.
That was a good one.
Mm-hmm. I'm a dad joke monster.
God.
Yeah.
I Swiss I was.
No, I don't feel blue. Pale Ale. Sierra Nevada Pale Ale right there. Beautifully shot. This book has great photography if you like to look at pictures of food like I do. But, you know, in her section of American Pale Ale, cheddar takes, you know, the different types of cheddar, sharp, and there's, you know, smooth, and all the different ones, you know, jack cheeses and stuff. But anyway, if you want to talk about, I had some goat cheese with Orval a couple weeks ago.
Ooh.
And it was one of those things where I was with my wife's cousins and we were eating this, and we had a number of beers before this, but everything kind of stopped. Like you almost like the record scratch. If we still listened to records and record scratch, and everything stopped when everybody started to, they had the cheese and then the sip of the beer, and it just all, and the singing, it was like angels and lights and the choir, something. And then like, you know, that was like one of those like, this is like a magic moment where these two things come together. Cheddar and Pale Ale it's a different thing, that the choir is going to be singing a different style of music, but it's still, you're going to have an angelic choir show up.
Yeah.
They may be playing bluegrass, but they're going to be playing, but what I'm saying
you know
is,
what? That's American though. Like, I mean, you're getting a good American Pale Ale, and you get a good aged cheddar. It doesn't have to be like a sharp cheddar or whatever, but just, you know, like a really good one that's got the little like gritty like calcium lactate crystals in there, that it's just kind of like, oh yeah, you know that it's not super smooth. There's a little grit to it, and that's where everything just, talking about things coming together.
Yeah. Pick up that one. Pick up this book. Follow her recommendations. Make some of your own, and you know, find a really good like cheesemonger or cheesemonger, I believe is the proper term. Cheese wrangler, like Houston Dairy Made, somewhere like that. Somebody, I think
cheesemonger is the official like. You know what? Most HEBs, or at least of like a good HEB, even a good Specs, will usually have a little deli department with some nice upscale cheeses and things.
Yeah.
You know, get to know your beer buyer, get to know your cheesemonger.
Yeah. You start with some cheddar, some Sierra Nevada Pale Ale. Call it a Saturday. That's a Saturday night to remember.
Yeah, that's a winner. Your significant other might not appreciate all the cheese and beer getting pounded, but you know what? But at least you've got beer and cheese.
Yeah, and I mean, I've got a beer cookbook around here somewhere. It's one of these back shelves. There's a recipe for apple and cheddar pale ale pancakes. Yeah,
that's a winner. Yeah. That sounds like breakfast, lunch, and dinner right there. Yeah. And
I mean, you go to the Sierra Nevada website on the pale ale page, and they've got like the recipe for the brats, and they've got such a versatile beer, an everyday beer, but just good.
Well, and this is we touched on this a little bit. This beer is not dry hopped. My understanding is that they do they have a hop back, so they just have a vessel that they pack full of hops, and as they're sending the wort from the brew house over to the fermenters to start fermenting, they just pump this beer through a bed of fresh hops or of a dried whole cone hops, which just gets you an immense flavor, aroma pickup, and all that in a way that you can't really do unless you're dry hopping or whatever. It's a unique, highly efficient way of doing stuff, and it's super cool. But yeah, like this is a beer from back before everything was, every pale ale had to be dry hopped because because pale ales were just, pale ales are just now mini IPAs. And so, it should be required drinking, because I think we talk about lupulin shift or lupulin threshold shift, which is a real science term, guys. I swear. But I think we as a society, as a craft beer drinking society, would really benefit from a bit of a shift backwards in taking a little bit of a time out from the really highly hopped stuff and going, all right, let's take a step back, look at some of these grandmasters, all the Sierra Nevada Pale Ale, and start over from scratch. Start drinking some of the stuff that set the tone, and then start working back from there.
Yeah, we could probably do a whole month on flagship, old school, like Rushmore beer type, founding father beers.
Oh yeah. We could certainly do that. I know we need to chit chat a little bit later and figure out what we want to do next. I got a couple of ideas, but I don't know. Josh, do you want to try and open it up to listeners out there and just say, like, if anybody, if anybody's got a, like, oh snap, like,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Hit us up on InterBrews Facebook page or Twitter, any of the socials. I check all of those. So yeah, just hashtag, or not even hashtag, just required, you don't have to do it. Just say, hey, this would be a cool one for you and Keenan to dig into, and I'll see all that and we'll do it, because why not? I mean, hey, do you want to talk about and drink this beer? Mm-hmm. I'm already sold. I don't know about you, Keenan.
What's the catch? What's the catch?
Yeah, absolutely. I love doing these episodes. I love drinking this beer. I love chatting with you. I love listen, there's nothing but love on this side of the microphone. So
Oh yeah.
But all right, so I don't know. I feel like, you could go on talk, like the Sierra Nevada Pale Ale is one of those where you can talk about a lot, and the history is super important. And Ken Grossman, much love to you, Mr. Grossman. You are an American hero. We appreciate all you've done for this beautiful industry and for this delicious beverage. And yeah, just thank you so much. If you see this on YouTube, somebody sends this to you, thank you so much. And just keep on keeping on. And thank you for this delicious beer and all your other beers. But man, it's one of those beers where we could talk about for a while, but then after a while, it kind of fades into the background and you're just sitting there having fun.
Yep.
Doing whatever it is you're doing, whether it's bike riding or playing pool or watching all the hockey all day long right now. Yeah. I don't know if anybody else is.
Yeah. Like, I mean, I've finished mine and it's been gone for however many minutes and it's just clean, gone. It's out of my palate. Like it is, I think it's firmly the benchmark for what the American Pale Ale should be. And I think it is absolutely required drinking to just remind everybody that what this style should aspire to be.
Yeah, it's, you know what it is? I've got a friend, Craig. I don't get to see Craig nearly as often as I want to. And we don't even chat as long, kids, life, all the things, right? But when I see Craig, we pick up right where we left off. There's no like, how come you haven't called me, or what's the deal? How come we're not closer? It's just, we appreciate, it's like in that moment, it's like this understood thing. We appreciate the time we get to spend when we get to, whether it's been 5 years or 2 months or however long it's been. Sierra Nevada Pale Ale is that beer. It's like, it doesn't require you to like, yeah, man, why aren't you drinking me more often? It doesn't do that. It doesn't do that. It's out there doing its thing. It's out there being a flagship, required drinking beer. And just go out there and then just, it doesn't matter that you haven't had Sierra Nevada Pale Ale in, 2 years. You can grab some and be like, yeah, dude, it's good to see you again. Yeah, it's good to see you too. How about some cheddar cheese? Anyway, that's all. That's what I'm saying. Required drinking.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, let's wrap it here. I think you've got a date night to go to.
Oh, you know it. Hot date with the missus.
Y'all going like just to the living room, or what do y'all got something
special?
I
think we're gonna play a board game in the kitchen. You know it.
Yeah. What board game?
We're gonna play a little ditty called Fox in the Forest. And that's not a euphemism, kids. No, that's a it's actually a really fun twist on spades.
I love spades.
Yeah,
Okay.
if I love spades too, but my wife is excellent at counting cards, and I am not. And so Fox in the Forest does a good job of twisting it up enough that it's like doesn't really matter how you count cards because you can only play like 2 or 3 hands, like only like plan 2 or 3 hands in advance.
Okay.
So it's a good pickup if you like spades for sure.
All right. There you go. All right. Endorsement there. Maybe we'll put an affiliate link down below.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. Well, we'll wrap there. And this is where we just say thank you so much for watching and or listening to this episode of InterBrews Required Drinking, Sierra Nevada Pale Ale. Be sure to subscribe on YouTube if you're listening. And if you're watching, be sure to subscribe to the podcast on your favorite podcast getting place because we're on all of those. And also, I will shamelessly self-promote. There's that Patreon page for InterBrews so we can make this thing more gussied up and all the awesome video stuff. And then also Liquid Lunch live every week. More days soon to come, just promoting all the awesomeness that is Texas craft beer. So, Keenan, thank you,
Josh. Sir. Of course. My pleasure, man. Drinking beer.
All right. I'm going to hit this outro music and we'll be out super quick. So to all of y'all, get out there and do your required drinking because it is required. So we'll see you right here next time. For Keenan, I'm Josh. See you next time on InterBrews Required Drinking. I did it better this time.
Yeah. I have a note.
The preceding has been a presentation of Stewed Productions.
All right. That's a wrap.
I got a note somewhere that's just like outro, 23 seconds.
All right. Stop
All right,
recording.
I gotta go start like